Hello everyone, I'm Caroline and welcome to my home on the hillside here in Wales. Now the last video I put out, you may remember seeing these fabrics. I got these free at a French flea market. So I want to trim off because this is just a big pile. I'm not sure where to start. So I thought, let's make a scrappy block because I've never made a scrappy block on camera and they're such fun to make. So I'm going to take all these fabrics and I'm going to cut off any scrappy bits. Got my fabric cutter. I'm not worrying about cutting anything straight. I'm just getting all the little bits off so that I can keep a fairly big piece of fabric, and then all these little bits I'll be able to use. Well, I don't know if I'll use them all. What I usually do when I'm making a scrappy quilt is I get all the bits and pieces that I may use, and then I just see how it feels as I'm going along. I think that one's going to be too small anyway. Come on, that selvage didn't want to cut. So I'll go through all these now, cutting all the bits off, the scrappy bits, and then we'll have a look what we've got left and see if there's enough just scrappy useless bits that we don't want, like this is coming to an ugly point. Take it off, we'll be able to use that, and then we'll see what we create. So I've got all these bits and pieces left. Now, they don't look much like this. They just look like a heap of rubbishy bits to throw away. But I'm going to turn this into a usable patch. And you can keep growing these patches and make usable fabric if you wanted to. You can even make this so wide and so long that you can roll it up and keep it as yardage. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to make a small patch to show you how I do this. Now, some of these I left a little bit larger because they were just odd shapes. I thought I might as well take them off. Some I didn't get much from, and some I didn't get any from. But let's see what I can do with these. So let's get my sewing machine out. Right, so let's do that bit again because I'd forgotten to set my camera going on my phone. So I'm going to cut off a piece of fabric. Ooh, I'm just going to go for that bit there. It really doesn't matter. Any shape, any size in one sense. I'm going to cut the selvage off there like that. And I'm going to put, where's my bit? That on there. I think that's the one I cut. And then I'm going to cut off these jaggedy edges there. And I've got this what I call a leader. It just stops all the little dangly bits being on your quilt. And also it stops the end. When you start sewing here, it can drag that into the inside of the machine and mush it up. And then you've got to try getting it out, which isn't fun. So by doing this, and then, whoops, it's got a bit of a bend, straighten it up. Now I've used a sewing machine for years, so I'm braver than I should be with the sewing machine. So if you see me sticking my fingers where they shouldn't be on a sewing machine, don't copy me. So far, I've been okay. I've never yet sewn my fingers to something. And then, I'll use this as another, all you need is a scrappy bit of fabric. Stick that under there. And then chop and chop. I've got that one to go under again. Now I'm going to open this out. Oh no, I've done. Do you remember me saying about doing the wrong sides together? And look what I've done. Let's jump forward to when I've done it the right way. There we go. I've got another piece that I've just done. I'm going to chop that. Let's have a look now. Let's make some space here. I've never filmed my machine and me working at the same time, so things are getting in a jumble. So first thing I'm going to do is iron this. I'm going to iron it to one side. I'm not going to open out the seams, which you can do, but it's very fiddly, and I find makes for a weaker seam anyway. So now I've got this. I'm going to get my quilting ruler. Got my ruler and I've got my cutter. I'm going to cut this at an interesting angle. I'll need to get rid of that. So I'm going to go from there. I'm going to cut it that way. And then we're getting both pieces of fabric into the next block. And I think this is so small, it's time for it to go to bed in the bin. I can't join that to anything. Well, maybe you could if you've got a lot of patience. I haven't got that much patience. So now I just get another colour. And I'm going to go across. We'll use this batik. There is absolutely no need at all, as you can see, to match these colours up, but coordinating does look lovely when you do it this way too. So I'm going to be coming along, and I don't want very pointy end on there, it's too small to sew to. So I'm going to sew down that straight line. You can pin it if you want to. If you've been sewing for a while and you're confident, then you don't need to. And if you've got slinky fabric, it's best to pin it because it'll wander off in the middle and you'll end up with a bulge. Try to keep your fabric edges together. See, I'm a naughty girl. I tend to keep my foot on the pedal when I'm getting ready to chop this off. And one day I'm going to run my fingers over. So now I'm just going to iron this little bit again. Right, let's have a look for something that's going to look really different. What have I got you? If I got a thin piece of this, watch you. We'll use this. I think I'll come down like that and see what that does. Oops, better chop that end off. It's funny, when I'm on my own, I'm fine. As soon as I try to film myself sewing, I'm all fingers and thumbs and forgetting things. Well, I'm still a bit fingers and thumbs and forgetting things anyway, but it makes it worse when you're trying to focus on two cameras. So let's see how we can cut this. Shall I do that? I think that would be fun. Yep, I'm going across there. You can do whatever you like. You could chop this off and make it more regular. You could do it that way. So you've got yourself a nice long thin patch. I can't remember what I said I was going to do now. I think I'll go there. It may not be what I said I was going to do, but I'm going to do it. And that white's getting a bit small, but it's okay. I'll be okay. I'm going to cut that straight. Getting as much of the bottom bit of white in as I can, so I'll probably chop that pointy bit off there. Okay, I need to change my blade. It does not want to go through that thick lump there. There we go. And now, what haven't we used? Let's use some pink. I do love my pink, so we're going to use some pink. Just cut the selvage off. You can see there on the back where the selvage is. I'm going to cut the little next door to the selvage as well. You quite often get these little dots. I don't know if you can see them. I'll try showing you on the phone, see if that helps. I don't know which one focused the best. So now, we can go right across there with some pink. That's going to look good. So I'm going to chop that little end off there that we don't need. And then pop the pink on. And sew along there. You can see this is very easy, very therapeutic, and an awful lot of fun. Now you've got the option to carry on building this. What you will find is if you build on the same pieces over and over, your pieces will have to get bigger. But there is an option that you can use that means that doesn't happen. And that is to work now on a second block or a second piece of a block. So let's have a look what we've got here. Let's put some plain pink in. We haven't got any plain pink. Now normally if you use really small bits, you don't have to keep chopping into things like this. You will have the tiny bits, but some of these are bigger than I would normally use for this. Get that, chop. Is that a selvage? I can't tell. It looks like one, so I'll chop it off anyway. And then we're going to sew along there. I think I'll do some strips on this and some stripes. I think that'll be fun. So I'm going to cut this straight. If I line up my lines on my ruler, there, and cut up there. And now add on another strip. So we'll go for, what about this bit of batik? Here we go for a bit of batik. A bit of batik. And off we go again. Now, some people don't press every time they sew a seam. I'd rather do that. I find that it makes for a, measure that there, it makes for a much more accurate block, if you see what I mean, because some fabrics bulge more than others and so bloop up and you don't know where you are. When you get to the end, iron them and they're not quite how you thought they were going to be. So I prefer to, I'm talking and thinking and measuring and it does not bode well. So I prefer to iron or press every block. And the whole, that's very essential, that is the word press, because I like to iron. I like to rub my iron vigorously all over the patch and get it. I feel like I'm doing some good doing that, but ideally you want to just press, because you can stretch your fabric if you do this business, which I always do. I try not to. My machine has started making a funny noise, and what that usually means is my bobbin's about to run out. I'm going to go for it, see if we can do this whole patch all in the bobbin that's in there. So now I'm going to cut the ends of those straight and then pop that on top of the pink. And I think that's going to be really effective. Now I'm going to lose the white there, so that has to come down a bit. Down you come, down you come. Right to the end of the white, there. Let's have a look what it's going to look like. Yes, I think that's about the best way to do it. So I'm going to chop off the end bit. Now you don't have to chop off the end bits if you don't do leaders and enders. You can just sew onto them and sew off them. But if you're using leaders and enders, they get in the way. Put that where I wanted it to be. And that'll be chopping off there. Eventually, I can straighten that later. And there it goes. Now it's coming along nicely. I think we'll put that to one side. We'll start working on another patch. And sometimes if you've got one straight edge and the other one isn't perfectly straight, then a way of cheating is to sew it with the straight edge, the one you know is straight, on the top. And that way then I can follow the edge of the straight piece and I don't have to trim the piece underneath. I know, very lazy, very naughty, but it saves a lot of time. So now I'm going to get all these little patches made and then we'll join up the one big block and trim it off and show you what happens. So now you can see just how little a dent it's made in all those pieces of fabric. I've got these little offcuts here that I'll be able to use when I start my next little scrappy block. So let's have a look what this scrappy block looks like. And I think that's beautiful. I didn't plan the colours, I didn't pick what colours I was going to use, but you can see I've ended up with an overruling pink theme here. But the plain pieces, I think, really look good. And when you're making these, rather than just use lumps of fabric, if you use tiny bits and join those up and then use those as a lump, is it a lump? I don't know where you got the word lump from, a piece of fabric, it makes it even more interesting. Now, I can't lie to you here, this is a very slow process. Absolutely deathly slow if you're a very impatient person. But what you can do is, unlike me, where I've made one block, is you just make loads of blocks at the same time. So you just keep sewing and you chain chain piecing is just when you sew one piece and then another piece and then another piece, all in one line and then cut them apart. So if you chain piece one piece after the other, after the other, after the other, and you end up with loads and loads of pieces, you can then join those twos into fours and then just keep doubling up and doubling up until you end up with enough to, perhaps you can cut 6 blocks at the same time. So that is the quicker way of doing it. One at a time is a slow, laborious process. But if you want to enjoy the process, if you want to live in the moment and you really want to appreciate everything you're doing, then I think one at a time is a nice thing to do, even though it is very slow. So now when I've got enough of these 6-inch blocks, I'll be able to make a quilt or use them as part of another quilt. Depends what I feel like doing. But they're great. Rather than throw your scraps away, why not just join them all together and make something like this? And I'll do a lot more scrappy blocks, I think, over the next few weeks, because I go through phases with my patchwork, and I'm quite getting into scrappy blocks. So maybe I'll make more scrappy blocks and show you how you can make different designs to make them more interesting. And maybe completely scrappy isn't for you, but there are ways of making scrappy blocks that are not so scruffy. So we'll have a look at some of those too. Well, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. But until then, don't forget, happy quilting and have fun. Bye.